What's up investors, Sneers here. Activision-Blizzard is being sued by the state of California for having a culture of frat boys. Now frat boys sounds cute compared to the allegations against some of the employees of Blizzard, and honestly I think it's unfair for frat boys anywhere because I'm sure not all of them are as disgusting or do things as unspeakable as some of the employees of Blizzard does allegedly. Along the usual suspects for such lawsuit like unfair payment for women or not promoting women because they will get pregnant or something like that, there are much more sinister things in there. Things like cubicle crawl, where employees of Blizzard will get drunk and go on literal cubicle crawl harassing women who work. And in the most extreme case, there is a record of harassing a woman in manners that I will not repeat it because it's so extreme, but it led to her killing herself in a company trip. This is extreme. Now I want to deep dive into the lawsuit and the details because there are people much more qualified than me to do that, and I encourage you to go to their places and read more about it. I instead will focus on the investing side and why investing in companies with bad culture such as Activision-Blizzard may harm your investments in the long term. I will talk about what bad culture does, as well as in the end of this video what good culture looks like and how it affects the businesses, so stay on for that. Guys, before we begin, I want to remind you I have additional content for the individual investor in the description below, and as always, if you can leave a like to this video as it helps me a lot with the YouTube algorithm and allows me to create more content for you. And with that said, let's start with the video. Whether bad cultures harm the bottom line of businesses isn't obvious. Some may say that being an asshole may help you in some business lines, but I claim that even though bad cultures may benefit in the short term, they are destroying their business in the long term. And Activision-Blizzard is a great example for that. Their culture have been bad for quite some time now. Coincidentally, I wrote about it in a deep dive analysis for the company I wrote a few months ago, way before this current event, and I wrote about these cases. The Hong Kong incident where Blizzard shut down and banned a competitor in one of their games that made a statement for the freedom of Hong Kong. The firing of the lead developers of Call of Duty franchise that went on and created a competitor. They created Apex Legends that now is a great competitor to Blizzard. So the effect of that bad behavior is widely visible. And laying off 800 employees while they announce record profits. It's not just bad optics, it's more than that, it's just being an asshole. I don't have any other word for that. And there are so many more bad cases like that I can create an hour-long video just talking about the bad culture of Activision Blizzard. Yet, despite this bad culture, the company kept growing. They broke their record profits and revenues year after year. So what gives? What happens here is a short-term squeeze of revenues, but since Activision Blizzard is so big with such massive cash flows, this short term becomes very long and even years long. I'll give two examples for that. First is squeezing your employees. If you mistreat your employees in the short term by getting them to overwork, or mistreat majority of employees by not firing a superstar employee even though he does really bad stuff to other employees like harassing women, you harm your results in the long term. But in the short term, you will get more work done. There's no question about it. You will get tired and exhausted and really harassed sometimes employees, but you will get more work done in the short term, and that's what Activision Blizzard decided to do. And in the case of Activision Blizzard, because of the strength of their brand, even though they burned out a lot of people that got fired or quit themselves from the company, they still had thousands of other people dreaming of working for this company because of their brand name. Second is squeezing your player base. And in this case, I want to talk about World of Warcraft. For some years now, the amount of subscribers for World of Warcraft is trending down, yet the revenues is trending up. So how can it be? The answer to that is that Blizzard just keeps squeezing the existing customers by creating more and more edgy ways of monetization for these customers and squeezing the money out of them. But eventually, these players are getting tired of this, and they are just recently, even before the current event of the allegations and the lawsuit, people are starting to move to Final Fantasy XIV, for example, alongside really big streamers like Asmongold and others. So even though they squeezed out their players, at some point a critical mass of players will go out of the game, and it won't be fun for the existing players anymore because it will be a dead game and the company will lose everything. But in the short term, yeah, obviously they break their revenues records year after year by using these techniques. But in the long term, they harm their player base and they harm their brand and they harm everything they do. Now, depending on the strength and the size of the company, this squeeze of players and employees and many other things may last much longer than you think. The brand of World of Warcraft is very, very good. And even though a player says that the game hasn't been good for a few years now, 3 or 4 or 5 years, it didn't harm the game immediately. And so is the culture of the company. It doesn't harm the employees and the hiring process of the company immediately because it's a really great brand and it's a really big company, so it's hard to break it down so fast. Yet it will harm the long term, and it will be hidden behind the numbers because of these squeezes. It looks, if you look at the numbers and the revenue growth, it looks like the company is great, but really they are destroying values year after year. Now here's the thing for investors. These companies with bad culture that squeeze the revenues in the short term, and in this case short term can be a few years, they trend up through these years because through each of these years they have record revenues and record profits, so of course they trend up. And I think this is a bad game to play, but it is a valid game to play. If you think you can time it, you can time the bad culture and the squeeze and invest just in the period that they will squeeze up the company, then by all means you can do that and you can do great revenues from that. But I prefer to do certain other investments. I prefer great companies that don't have a due date, because a company with really bad culture, even though they squeeze out the revenues in the short term, they do have a due date. And because they have a due date, you will eventually have to sell them, and you have to stress out about the news and keep pace with what they do, so you won't miss the point you need to sell at. And it's not a compounder because of that, because you have to sell. So the company will not compound for years, it will compound for the time period of the squeeze. It might be 3 years, it might be even be 10 years, but eventually you will have to sell. And I prefer companies I will never have to sell. And because you have to sell, you have to pay taxes eventually, which in companies you never have to sell, these taxes are kept within the company that kept growing and is great for your compounding. And the second thing is, it's a company you invest a lot of time to learn and to understand their business. And if you have to sell them, all this time you invest in and all this knowledge is now useless to you. Now let's talk for a bit about great companies with great culture. And the first company that comes to mind is Zappos. Their former CEO, Tony Hsieh, published a book called Delivering Happiness, which I highly recommend you will read. In this book, he describes the culture of Zappos and his journey. Zappos, because of their investment in culture, became known for their great customer service. So much so that the company grew at a very rapid pace, so that in 2009, Amazon purchased the company for $1 billion, and in 2009 it was a big deal, $1 billion. I know it doesn't sound like a big deal right now. And not only that, they purchased the company in the terms of the company not to integrate it into Amazon, but leave the company as an independent section. Because the culture of Zappos was so good and their name of customer service were so much advanced, Amazon agreed to that, and it's not something that Amazon usually does, and they allowed it to be a separate section because of their great culture. The second example is Chick-fil-A. They created such a great environment for their employees. They pay for their employees' college tuition through time, and also they keep their restaurants closed every Sunday, and they do that because they want their employees to have a rest day. And presumably Sunday is the best sales day for such a company, such a restaurant like Chick-fil-A. And this investment in their culture and the environment for their employees pays out in the bottom line. You can see it in this graph from Business Insider. They are the first largest chain in the US while having so much less restaurants opened than other chains. So it tells you how much profitable they really are. And I think they really deserve it for how they treat their employees and how they treat their environment. So guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. And if you want to see more content for individual investors from me, hit the subscribe button below. And with that said, I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.